In this video, I'm going to teach you how to be successful in this math class. So I will give you tips for what to do in class, what to do while you're doing your homework, what to do to study for your test, what to do when you're taking the test, and then how to avoid math anxiety. So all of this I got from a book called Winning at Math by Paul Nolting. So in class, when you're in my class, I want to make sure that you are always present. And I mean present in body, but also in mind. Um, if you have any questions, you need to ask them. If you are one of those that don't like raising your hand and don't like asking questions, just look really confused, and I'll take that as a cue to re-explain um, and maybe do another example. It is very important that you take notes. And so I have blank notes on D2L that you need to print out before coming to class each day. Okay, so just look at your calendar and print out those notes. You may want to just go ahead and print out a chapter or two at a time so you always have them with you. The blank notes are really important because I've got all the problems that we're going to be working. So you will have less writing, so you'll make less careless errors, and you have more time to just think about what I'm saying. There will be times in Math 110 where I am going to be going fast, and you may get a little lost. Okay, and that is okay. Sometimes I know you're going to get lost because I know it's about the third example that people start catching on. So it's okay. Just keep copying down all the steps, not just even when you're lost, but especially when you're lost. You want to keep writing down the steps that I have for you. And then if you are lost, put that big question mark beside the notes right where you feel like you are lost. That way, when you have questions, you can just come stay after class or come to my office hours, and I can explain that section of notes to you. You can also go to the tutoring center. Now let's talk about what to do after class. So you've come to class, I've filled your brain full for an hour and 20 minutes. What do? Once you leave class, you need to go back through your notes as soon as possible, because Paul Nolting says that the forgetting that you might do, most of it happens within 1 hour of class. So if you have any breaks in between classes, you want to sit down and rewrite any notes that you can't read. So you may have been writing really fast in class, and it gets a little messy. So rewrite anything you can't read. If there's any gaps, anything you didn't catch in class, see if you can fill in those gaps. And also add the calculator keystrokes that I'm going to teach you. Now, I already have some of those in the notes, but any that I don't, go ahead and put those calculator keystrokes in your notes so that you don't forget them. So that's what you do immediately after class, or as soon as you can, okay? Also, that same day, I want you to go ahead and start working on your homework. Now, in my math lab, the homework are called quiz-mes. Okay, so I want you to find a quiet place to work. Now, quiet can be your quiet. Okay, your quiet might mean you need to have some music going on in the background. Okay, and that's fine. Just whatever you work best to. I want you to find your place. Make sure try and find the same place each day, because when you go to the same place each day to study, when you sit down there, it's like your brain automatically knows what to do. Oh, I'm in my study place. When I was in college, I always went to the library, and I had my spot on the third floor in the stacks, and it was my cubicle. And the minute I sat down, within, 5 minutes or so, my body said, oh, I'm supposed to study. So I would just start concentrating immediately. So anyway, so you want to start doing those quiz-mes. I want you to attempt every single problem and write down every step. Even though the quiz means you just enter the answer in, you need to be writing those steps down. Even if you only have about 15 minutes, you can get in there and work one of the quiz me's. Okay, so the quiz me's, there's 5 questions for every topic that we cover in a section. So if we cover 4 topics, then 4 times 5, you'd have 20 questions in that homework. And you have unlimited tries, so you can do them as many times as you want. Okay. While you're working your quiz me's, you want to make sure you stay organized and neat. Number the problems so that if you get stuck, it's easy to go back and see what the problem was, and I can help you figure out what happened, what some of the mistakes that you were making. Make sure you star the harder problems, even if you got them right. Star them so that you know, oh, those are the ones I really need to study. Always end on a good note. In other words, if every single time you go in to work your homework, you get super frustrated and you just quit, and I'm just finished, and you're frustrated and you go on and do something else, then that sort of trains your brain to know that when I start my homework, I'm going to end in frustration. So end on a good note, even if that means going back and reworking some problems that you already think you know how to do. You just might need a little bit more practice so that you end being very successful. So you want to complete all the quiz me's for the section during the week. Okay, do it during the week, because during the week, the tutoring center is available and it is open from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Okay, except on Fridays, and then it's 8 to 1:30. Okay, so they are available. I'm available during my office hours. So if you wait until Sunday night, which is when I make all my due dates on Sunday night. If you wait till then, you're not going to earn enough mastery points to get access to the section quiz. Okay, so you have to get enough mastery points. So you have to pass, I guess you could say, pass each one of those homework quiz me's, okay, to get access to your section quiz. Now, by passing, I mean you need to get a 60%. So 60%, that is a D. So I'm asking you to get a D. If you can get a D, you can get into the section quiz. Now, you don't want a D because when you get in the section quiz, you're going to make a D on the section quiz. So I just don't want to keep you from getting access. But I also don't want you to start taking the section quiz until you've actually tried to work some of these problems. So anyway, and on the good news is the quiz me, if you make a D, it automatically turns into 100. Okay, so basically it is pass fail. Pass fail. If you pass that quiz me, okay, then you can go on to the next quiz me. Okay, so it's basically pass fail. If you pass all of them, then you get access to the section quiz. All right, now what to do after class? So after class, get help on those quiz me's. Like I said, from the TLC during the week. You have that unlimited attempts again. Okay, here is a big thing to remember. Please expect to struggle. If you did not struggle in this math class, that means you probably didn't even need to take this math class, right? If you already know the material, then you didn't need to take it. Okay, so I want you to expect to struggle. If you are expecting to struggle and work through that struggle and learn, then you won't be frustrated when you do struggle. Okay. Now the section quizzes, as soon as you understand that homework, as soon as you've worked those quiz me's, I want you to take the section quiz. You get 2 attempts on your section quizzes. Okay. On the homework, which is the quiz me's, and I'm sorry that my math lab doesn't let me change that word to homework, but on the quiz me's, you get unlimited attempts. But on the section quizzes, you only get 2 attempts, okay? So you go in one time, you take the section quiz, and you can see what you did wrong, right? So check and see which ones you missed, go back, figure out how to do them, and then go back in and take the section quiz, okay? The key in math, literally, is if you get behind on that math homework, that is really academic suicide. It is really like a snowball effect. It starts with you just get a little bit behind. Maybe you don't understand about a third of a section, and then you don't go to the TLC. You don't come and get help from me, and then math builds. So the next thing you know, you're a whole section behind, and then you don't understand a half a chapter, and then it just keeps building. Okay, so do stay up on all of your work and do it during the week if at all possible. All right, so now let's talk about studying for the test. The main thing is you need to start early, at least 3 days ahead. And this is one of the main reasons why. Paul Nolting said that when you study new material the night before, in other words, you're trying to cram in new stuff, it's going to push that old material out of your brain. Have you ever gotten on a test and said, "Man, but I knew this stuff. I studied and I knew this stuff." I bet the night before you were trying to push new stuff in, and it pushes the old stuff out. So the night before is just for review. If there's stuff that you didn't get to, but then just let it go. Okay. Now, if there's a whole lot you didn't get to, you're probably going to fail that test anyway. Okay. So if there's 1 or 2 things you didn't get to, don't try and cram it in the night before the test. Okay. You just review everything you've got and then take the test and then put it in your brain for the final. Okay. So the night before is just to review. So how do you study for a test? So what I want you to do is make a cheat sheet. Okay, so you're going to take out a piece of paper and you're going to write down all the formulas that you might need for that test. You're going to write down any vocabulary that you think might be on there, things that you might not understand, words that I might say that you're like, "Oh, I always forget what that means." Um, Maybe some sample problems. You can even put a few prayers on there if you want to. Whatever you think would help you to take the test. Okay. Now, do I let you use a cheat sheet? No, I don't let you use a cheat sheet on the test. Okay. But I'm going to show you how to use this cheat sheet actually on the test. Okay. I'll give you a little tip about that, but I want you to make a cheat sheet for every single test. Okay. And so, we'll talk about what you get to do with that cheat sheet in a minute. Okay. Also, I have some practice tests on MyLab. Okay, they're on MyLab Math. And I want you to take those practice tests several times. You'll probably see these same tests, same problems on the test. Okay. Now, my tests are paper and pencil. I don't give MyLab tests. Okay. But what I've done is I've taken the MyLab tests and I've taken problems off of those MyLab tests. You will probably find my tests are a little bit easier than the practice test. But what I want you to do is pretend that it is an actual test. That practice test is an actual test. In other words, do not use your notes because you don't get to use your notes for the test. So don't use your notes on the practice test. Number your problems and write down all the steps just as if you were taking the test. My math lab also times it. It's a time test. So you will get the same amount of time for the practice test as you do for a real test. So I want you to put yourself in a testing environment as much as you can. Okay. And then if you take the practice test and you do horribly on it, then you know, okay, I need to take it again. And you also know, I didn't know how to do this and this and this. And so you go back and you look at your notes. Okay, maybe go back in through some quiz me's and do some practice, because you can always have access to the quiz me's. Go back in and do some practice until you're like, okay, I think I can do it again. And then go back in and take the practice test again. Um, do that until you are making good grades on those practice tests without using your notes. Okay. Let's talk about what to do while taking the test. This is where the cheat sheet comes in. So right before the test, so when I come in and I'm holding these tests in my hand, when I look across the classroom, I should see everybody looking at their cheat sheets. Okay, I want you to be reviewing that cheat sheet right before the test. Then I'm going to hand out the test. I should say it the other way around. You put away your cheat sheet, and then I'm going to hand out the test. First thing I want you to do on that test is what's called a brain dump. I want you to write down everything on that cheat sheet that you think you're going to need on that test. Okay, so you can write it on the scrap, I call it scrap piece of paper, but you can write it on the paper that you're going to do your work on. You can write it on the actual test. I don't really care. I just want you to put down everything that you remember from your cheat sheet. That's usually formulas, maybe some little other tips that I'm going to give you, some mnemonics to remember stuff. But do that brain dump, okay? Then I want you to scan the test. Okay, it's paper and pencil. So just go through and look at the test, okay? And I want you to mark the easy ones. Put a check mark or a dot or something by them to mark the easy ones. So those are going to be the ones you're going to do first, okay? Then, after you've scanned the whole test, it might jog your memory. Oh, yeah, there's the quadratic formula. I want to make sure I don't forget that. So you do that second brain dump. You may have written down everything you need, but if not, go ahead, give yourself time to do that. Um, I'm going to try and remember to tell you guys when you about halfway through the test, okay? But if I don't, just look at the clock and say, okay, at this time I should be about halfway finished. That's going to help you so that you don't so that you don't finish the test too late, okay? Then go ahead and start working those easiest problems, the ones that you checked. Mark those, work them first. Make sure on your paper, though, on the work paper, that you write the numbers, because they're going to be out of order if you're doing the easiest first usually. So make sure you write number 1, and then maybe you skip to number 5 and number 7. I have to have those numbers so that I can easily find your work, okay? Because I don't give credit for just answers, okay? You get maybe 1 or 2 points credit for the answer. All the rest of the credit comes from your work, okay? So work the easiest ones, then go back in and work the more difficult ones and try and finish all of them, okay? And then if you may have a couple that are just really, really tough, you're going to save those for the very last, okay? And then you're going to put down as much as you can. Put down as much as you remember. Okay, I know I got to use the quadratic formula on this, so you at least write down the quadratic formula, okay? People say you can't fluff a math class. You can't pretend that you know stuff. I say go ahead, put as much down as you can, as you think applies to that, because if any of it actually applies, I may give you a point or two. Who knows? All right, so I want you to always, guess. Never leave anything blank, okay? Just guess. You may have no idea, but see if you can come up with an educated guess, okay? And use all of the time for taking that test, okay? All right, so now let's talk about where most people make mistakes, the main errors that I find on people's tests. Okay, and this is also what Paul Nolting found as well. So one of the things is when you misread something. Okay, so you want to make sure that you read the directions. Okay, I know that sounds, um, it just makes sense, but a lot of folks just look at the math problem and just start working it. And I might not ask for you to solve the whole thing. I might ask for a little piece of it. So make sure that you read the directions. The next thing is just careless errors. You know, 2 times 2 is 12 or something. Just careless mistakes. Um, the next ones are called concept errors. Okay, so concept errors are the ones we really, really want to catch. Okay, so I'm going to hand back your test the day after you take it. Okay, so next class period, we're going to be going over the test. And I want you to write down any concept errors, anything that, and you might want to write down the careless mistakes too, so you don't make those, but especially concept errors. In other words, let's say that you thought a negative times a negative was a negative. So if you said -2 times -4 instead of +8, you always thought that was a negative. Okay. Well, that is a concept error. Okay. And anytime you have a negative times a negative, you're going to miss that. Okay. So we want to make sure you realize, oh, okay, that isn't right. So it's got to be a positive. So then that's going to correct, you've got to correct those concept errors so that you don't make them over and over and over again and they really hurt your grade. Okay. As well as, you want to get your concepts right. The other one is application. Okay, so an application error, that is our favorite. That's from word problems. So that's just reading word problems incorrectly or working them incorrectly. And I'm going to try and help you with that and sort of point out some errors that people make in word problems. Another one is not completing the last step. So I might have a 3-part, it might have 3 parts to it, and you only do the first 2. Okay, so make sure, and I've tried to put 3 answer blanks, so you're like, oh, wait a minute, what's that blank for? But I still have students that do that. Or people go back and they change their answers. Usually your first answer is the right one, okay? But a lot of times people will go back and say, oh, I don't know, that doesn't look right. And so they change it and miss it, okay? A lot of times people spend just too much time on just one problem. So they get stuck on problem number 3 and spend 45 minutes on it. And next thing they know, oh my gosh, the test is due. So that's why I want you to do the easy ones first, okay? And do the hard ones last. All right. So here's a couple of others. So we got just a few more. Rushing through those easy problems. So you're doing those easy problems first and you're like, oh, I got this. And you rush through it and you don't really take time on those easy problems. Or this happens all the time, copying the answer from the work wrong. So you just copy it wrong. Now, fortunately, you've got a teacher that goes back and spends a lot of time trying to find um, you some points. So I might mark the answer wrong, but when I go back and look at your work, I'll be like, oh, they got all the work right. So they just get 2 points off instead of it was worth 12. Okay, so but it would be much better if you didn't copy it wrong and then you get those 2 points. Or you leave the answer blank. You might have even worked the problem, but you leave the answer blank, or you just don't work it. So I want to make sure that you try and work every problem. Again, only worked half of a 2-part problem, or you have a calculator issue. So what I don't want you to do, and this happens a whole lot when we are doing our logarithms, okay? When we're doing logs, the chapter on logs and exponentials, folks will they write down all the stuff right. And then all that's left is to plug it in the calculator. But it's pretty hard to plug some of that stuff in the calculator. If you don't practice, you're going to miss it. Okay, so you need to practice plugging things in your calculator to get that right answer. And working problems in your head. Don't do it. Even though some of you are like, I know I can do that. Here's the thing. I can't open up your head and look in there and go, oh, they just dropped a negative and give you extra points. Okay. So when you do stuff in your head, 2 things happen. 1, if you miss the problem, I cannot give you partial credit. And 2, lots of people miss problems because they're doing stuff in their head and they don't catch those careless mistakes that you do in your head. Okay. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is math anxiety. And some of you guys may not have any math anxiety, but I was not one of those people. So, whenever I would go in to take a math test, I would be, I mean, sweating. I guess should say glowing. I was glowing profusely. I would be super, super nervous. And it was just because it was test day and that test would hit my desk, and sometimes I would just draw a blank. So here is the good news. The good news is that this math anxiety is a learned behavior. I learned it. And I won't tell you any names, but I have to say some of my elementary math teachers um, made me very anxious. Made me get up at the board and try and work stuff in front of other people, made me really nervous, which is why I'm never going to ask you to do that. I'm never going to force anybody to work a problem in front of other people. Um, and and they just did other things that made me very anxious in math. Okay. But it can be unlearned. Anything that's learned can be unlearned. Okay. And I had to unlearn it. So one of the main way is you're going to have to manage your self-talk, the things that you say to yourself. You automatically say these things. Let's say you get to the second problem and you are struggling with number 2 and you say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I'm only on number 2 and I'm already stuck. I might as well just turn this paper in. This is ridiculous. I'm going to fail this class. And you just start saying all that. And it just automatically happens. Some of y'all don't do that, but a lot of us do. Okay. So a lot of times this negative self-talk is illogical. Does it make sense that if I'm struggling with number 2, that I should just turn that paper in? No, that does not make a bit of sense. Okay. You still should keep trying and skip number 2, go on to the next one. Okay. So you need to manage that self-talk by replacing it with what's called a counter script. So I want you to look at some counter scripts. Let's see. Here's some. So what if you went blank on the last test? Okay. If you go blank on the last test and you start taking you went blank on test number 1. You start taking test number 2 and you're starting to draw a blank. You are going to, normally, you might say, I went blank on the last test and failed it, and here I go again. I might as well hang it up, turn it in, all that stuff. You need to stop it, stop that self-talk, and say, in your mind, not out loud, because your neighbor would get mad. I went blank on that last test, but now I know how to reduce some anxiety. I'm going to be fine. So you have to stop the bad self-talk and replace it with positive things. Okay, here's another one. I prepared for this test. So this is when you get to another problem where you're getting stuck. And normally you go, oh my gosh, it's a number 2. I'm already stuck. I might as well quit. Instead, you're going to say, wait a minute. I really prepared for this test. I expected that some of it's going to be hard. I'm not going to get discouraged. I'm going to keep going. You have to say that to yourself during the test. Okay. Some of you, this may not be your first go round, right? You may be back in Math 110. You've already taken it once or twice. Okay. You may be back in it again. When that happens, a whole lot of this negative talk is going to rear up in your head when you're taking tests. Okay. I failed this course last semester. Oh my gosh. Test number 1, I'm failing it again. I might as well just quit. I'm just going to turn my paper in. All that stuff that you normally say, you need to stop that. You will, when it comes in your brain, you're going to think, I failed this course last semester. That's automatic. But then you can say, but wait a minute. I can use my new study skills and I'm going to pass. Okay. Or I am not going to be anxious. I'm going to calm myself down. When you start getting anxious, You're going to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to calm myself down. And you might be saying, Miss Kitts, how in the world do you calm yourself down? I have no idea. Okay, well, let me tell you. Okay, so here are some ways to do this calm yourself down business. And you math anxiety people, you know what I'm talking about. All of you that don't get math anxiety, pat yourself on the back. Yay, you. But the rest of us, um, here's some relaxation techniques, and some of them are wonky, and you're going to think I'm weird, but do not knock it till you try it. I'm just telling you. Okay, so the first one's called tensing and relaxing. Okay, so tensing and relaxing is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to, and you can do this without anybody noticing. You just you're sitting in your chair, and you just tense all your muscles. You make little fists, and you put them down by your side, and you just make fists, tense all your muscles up, tense your legs up, tense your stomach up, and hold it for a few minutes, not a few minutes, a few seconds, and then you release it. And then you do it again. And you do it maybe 5, 10 times, and you will see your muscles starting to relax. Okay, that's similar to this. The tensing and relaxing is very similar to the palming method. The palming method, you're going to take your hands and you're going to put it under your desk. Okay, so you put them under the desk and press up on the desk. Okay, or you can do it under your chair if you think you might lift the desk up under the chair. And it's basically the same thing as tensing and relaxing. You're going to really put a lot of pressure on that palm and like push on that desk or that chair really, really hard and tense that way, and then release. So it's very similar. Deep breathing, just that. You're going to take some deep breaths. Now, when you do that, please don't do this. Like that, because your neighbor's not going to be too happy with you. You can do deep breathing without anyone knowing. I just did it. It was actually not super deep because I didn't want to take time for the video, but you didn't hear me, okay? So you can take a deep breath, hold it, and then release, okay? Visualization, that helps some people. If you are ADD, ADHD, I would not suggest this, okay? But visualization is where you're panicking, you're freaking out, so you're like, I'm going to go on a little mini vacation. I'm going to take a trip to Hilton Head or the mountains or wherever your favorite place. I'm going to go to Milliken and go run around the lakes or whatever. You visualize yourself there, okay? And for some people, that really works. For me, I just stay there. So I would stay there, and then the teacher says, turn in the test. And I'm like, oh, crud, I did not finish the test. So, but visualization is fine as long as you come back. You got to come back and take the test. Okay. Thought stopping is, I think, the most important, and it is also the weirdest. Okay. Thought stopping has to be practiced during homework. Okay, you got to practice it during homework. What that is we're going to go back up to these counter counter scripts. Okay, so when you are doing your homework and you start getting really anxious and you start telling yourself, I failed this course last semester, you have to stop yourself from thinking that. Okay, so the weird part is where you smack the table. Like you think it, you're thinking, oh, I'm not going to be able to pass this class. And you say, stop it. My dogs just jumped. Anyway, literally smack the table and say, stop it. And then replace it with a counter script. Okay. Smack the table. Stop it. Replace it with counter script. Or smack yourself. You might smack your face. Stop it. I know it's weird. Whatever it takes for you to stop that thought midstream and replace it with a counter script. The reason you have to practice is during the test. I'm so sorry, but you cannot just start smacking the table because your neighbor will be really upset with you. And I might scream or something. That scare me. Anyway, so you've got to practice the thought stopping enough so that you can do it in your noggin, just in your head during the test. Okay. I guess you could smack yourself if you don't do it really hard. But anyway, okay. So, but that is honestly the thought stopping for you math anxiety people, and you know who you are, that talk to yourself during those tests, and negative thoughts during those tests. You have to practice it because it does not come naturally. That is it. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to email me or talk to me during class or after class or before class, okay? Now you can take the extra credit quiz that is in D2L to get some points on your test.